Welcome back, ball fans, NBA and NCAA college basketball fans, high school fans too. You're here at Sean on Boxing, a subsidiary of Sean on Boxing and Sean on Liverpool. So if you like football, soccer, or boxing, check out my other channels. For today, we're going to be talking about the second half of the NBA season and what to expect and how things look like they're going to unfold. We just had obviously the NBA All-Star game. After that, I'm excited to get back to the season because having the NBA All-Star game as the only basketball for me to watch was a little disappointing. Luckily, I had NCAA and I caught up on a lot of big teams playing this past weekend, which was both educational going into March Madness, get ready to make your picks, and obviously just to see some teams that maybe I wasn't so familiar with, just so when I do have to make my picks, I'm going to be far more up to date on who's where and what to expect and how teams are rolling. But let's get to this today. Let me share this. So there we go. NBA Talk Episode 1, Sean on Ball. So let's get to this. Obviously, there's a lot of interesting topics to talk about leading into the second half of the season. So number one, who will win the MVP award this season? I mean, talk about making statements coming into the first game after the All-Star game. Shea Gilchrist Alexander, my brethren from Canada, Hamilton, came out and looked fantastic, dominating and dictating his team to a win over the Clippers. It was a great performance by him and just continued to show the dominance that he has and how he is the linchpin in the motor that drives that team. Obviously, they have a lot of good key components to that team, but he is definitely the main man that keeps that team running. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward in the playoffs once they have to match up with other teams in the 7-game series. Then, of course, we had Doncic, Luka, who came out, and along with Kyrie Irving, who put on a Globetrotter-esque display on the court, put up 70 points together to get a big win yesterday as well over Phoenix, really showing the dominance they have over both Durant and Booker, two guys who early on in the season were being talked about as potential MVP candidates, and Phoenix was being discussed as the best team in the NBA, obviously before James Harden went to the Clippers and really created a mega super team over there. And of course, people overlooking the teams that have put in their work and continuously have done it. People always looking for the new shiny toy, and Phoenix was that new shiny toy. But Dallas seems to have their number, so Phoenix better hope they don't run into them in the playoffs. Then, of course, we have the Joker, two-time MVP, NBA champion, MVP playoff champion winner, went out and did what he always does, consistent. 10 for 10 from the field, triple-double, the first time against that team, I think, that they played, and just did what he does, right? He just makes that team work smoothly, right? Finding the open players, giving them open shots, just allowing the team to run a smooth, well-oiled offense. And that's what they did yesterday as well. So these three potential candidates definitely put themselves up there, justifying why they are three of the top guys in the conversation right now, along obviously with Tatum, who's leading Boston to the number one position in the East. But obviously we know with Boston, they are a two-headed monster with him and Brown. And that potentially can take away from Tatum's potential to be the MVP, right? I mean, obviously his team is number one in a weak East team. Now that Joel Embiid's Philadelphia 76ers look like they're done, now that he's obviously hurt and no longer in the running after starting the season very dominantly, it looks like the best team and the eventual NBA champion is probably going to come out of the West, unless Boston can allow these Western teams to beat themselves up. So by the time they do play Boston in the finals, Boston's going to be well rested and healthy. And that is the positive for them. So who do you have winning this year's MVP at this point? Obviously, there's a lot of season left. Luka is averaging what, 30, almost 35 points a game, 9 and 9. I think it's just under 9 rebounds, but basically, 35, 9 and 9. Those are his numbers that he's putting up now. Those are MVP numbers. And his team is going to easily get to the number 5 position in the West. I think that's just a certainty. And then they're going to be behind the other 4-headed monster teams at the West. And the West is deep. Those top 5 teams, really, really, really solid teams. When we talk about, obviously, Denver, the Clippers, Minnesota, Dallas, and who's the one team I'm forgetting? Oh, Oak City, right? So those 5 teams, dominant, right? Whoever comes out of the West is going to be a very scary team as long as they can stay healthy. And I would think at this point, it's pretty obvious that the guy who's going to win the MVP award is going to come from the West. But let me know in the comment section below, what do you think? Who do you think deserves the MVP award, and what team? Oh, well, obviously you tell me who he is and I know what team he comes from. So let's move to part 2. So there we are. Will Boston finally prove they have what it takes to win the title? It was interesting today. I was watching ESPN First Take, and they were talking about Milwaukee Bucks, and if they have the most pressure on them to win an NBA championship this year, and Giannis to obviously put himself in position to be a 2-time winner. And obviously a lot of that comes because of the office and team moves that he's pushed on Milwaukee, obviously bringing in Damian Lillard and getting rid of their coach mid-season and making these kind of changes, right? Showing that he is kind of a guy that wants to dominate and dictate what's going on in the office and on the floor. And are these things going to be a positive or a negative as far as Milwaukee is concerned? And this was a conversation that they had. But for me, the obvious choice of a team that needs to win this year is Boston. Boston just paid the highest contract in the NBA, I think, to Brown, who is the two-headed monster for Boston along with Tatum. This is a team that people have felt was made to win over the last few years, right? When they had one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. And then consistently, they've choked in the playoffs, right? They've dropped the ball and allowed other teams to get the title ahead of them. And a lot of this has been the inconsistent play we've gotten from the 2 superstar players in Boston. This year, early on, my feeling was that they didn't have very much depth. I mean, so far, the results prove me wrong, I suppose, because they are the number 1 team in the NBA as far as win-losses. And if that's the case, then I guess they have just as much depth as they need. But when I look at the roster, I still feel that in a tough 7-game playoff series, they don't have the roster depth that the other teams have. Last night, when I was looking at Denver as an example, they have easily 11 men on their bench, that's including the starters, that can all play big minutes, 11. And all of them can play big minutes, depending on foul trouble or injuries or matchups or whatever the situation is. They can adjust because that's how deep their squad is, right? The guy they drafted, their first draft pick last year, didn't even play last night. But when he has played, he's been, I think, one of the potentially best draft picks from last year's draft. It doesn't mean he's going to be the number 1 or the guy that has the best career, but he's going to be a guy, if he stays healthy, that is going to be consistently talked about as a steal for Denver, right? Because he's shown the perfect sort of game to fit into that squad. So their depth is unreal, and other teams have great depth as well. The problem with a team like Boston, I don't know if their depth is really that good. Let's just take a quick look, because maybe I'm delusional. It's been said before, and it wouldn't be the first time that somebody's called me delusional. So don't be afraid in the comment section to call me delusional. It's okay. I have thick skin. Boston Celtics roster. So there we go. So we got Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Porzingis, right? A great front line. The one problem about Porzingis is career-wise, he's been an injury-prone player. And not necessarily a guy that matches up with every team that well. Then you have Derek White, who obviously is a very good complementary piece, good three-point shooter, solid player, works really hard. Drew Holiday, which was a great pickup, obviously played great for Milwaukee, leading them or helping them win an NBA playoff championship. And now you throw him in with this team. And right there, that starting five looks great. They don't have the best size, but overall, great athleticism, great shooting all around the court, very mobile. You got Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench, Al Horford, who's a really, really integral part of that team. He's shown that year after year, but he is getting old, right? I remember him playing with Noah and Brewer in Florida, the Gators. What a great team. NCAA, great team, right? Then you got Jordan Walsh, who came out of Alabama last year, Villanueva 2.0. He's a rookie. So expectations for him obviously can't be that high. Potentially down the road, he could be an integral part to that team. He's long, he's athletic, he obviously has good range on his jump shot as well, and he's versatile. So he fits in this team. Nemesis Queta, big center. To tell you the truth, I don't even know who he is. I'm not as hardcore in the NBA as I used to be. Luke Cornett, another big man on the team. Sam Hauser, O'Shea Brissett, Delano Bayton. Oh my God. What's his face? Mila Kalchuk, the guy that used to play for the Lakers, right? Lamar Stevenson, Jordanian Devontae, Drew Peterson, Xavier Tillman Sr., and Jaden Springer. Right there, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 players that are on this roster that I don't even know if they could make the Denver Nuggets. 11. And then you have Horford, Pritchard, Holiday, White, Porzingis, Brown, and Tatum. That's 7 players. So I really do think depth is going to be something that hurts them moving forward once we get into the playoffs. So let's get to the next point of contention. There we go. Will Denver repeat in 2023-24? I'm a Golden State Warriors fan. So the fact that I'm leaning towards Denver to win is because when I watch Denver, the talent, the depth, the Joker's dominance, the fact that Murray has been injured and hasn't even performed close to his best so far this year. And if he's at his best going to the playoff, props, another Canadian. I think this team is unstoppable. I don't see how Boston competes with Denver. Obviously, teams in the West potentially could, but let's think, which team? Minnesota, eh? Minnesota is young. The problem with their second best player, he's a hog who shoots too much. The problem with their best player is he's ready to sort of step back and allow other players to take the lead. Their third best player has no offense really, and he's just a defensive player, which is obviously an integral part of the team. But what's he going to do covering the Joker when he steps up and starts hitting three-pointers and opens up the lane for backdoors and lobs, right? Then you think of the Clippers. I mean, 2 of the best players on that team are injury-prone. The other 2 are inconsistent and, virtually, head cases. And then we think of Golden State. They lack a lot of length to compete with Denver. Oak City, young. I don't think they have the quality players that can really stop Denver in a 7-game series. And then, of course, who am I missing? Oh, and then we have Dallas. And I think Dallas matches up really well with them. But at this point, we still have to see how those new parts sort of get integrated into Dallas's team and how they look going into the playoffs. If Kyrie Irving is going to be 100% healthy, and that's going to obviously be a big thing moving forward. That's going to obviously have a big impact on that team. But, a great team, a great squad. I don't see how anybody is going to stop Denver unless Denver stops themselves, whether that's through injuries or whatever sort of inconsistent play might surface. But as I said, they have so much depth that if you do have a player that's off, you can bench that guy. And there's lots of people on the bench that can come in and fill in that gap. So this is a team I think will repeat. Let me know in the comment section below, who do you have winning this year's NBA championship? And do you think Denver can do it? Or are you favoring one of the other top teams in the league? Let's move to part number 5. This year's scoring. Will scoring continue to be crazy in the second half of the season? The first half of this year, we had some unbelievable nights from players around the league. Booker, obviously, Embiid, Luka, and many other players that just went off on teams. And you can see this by the All-Star game. The highest point output in history, 211 points for the winner, which to me is comical. I mean, the lack of intensity and defense and just will to actually win a game is the only reason that game ended up the way it did. Something that I don't think anybody was interested in watching. But let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed the All-Star game, and then we can address that. But as far as I'm concerned, I was very disappointed with this year's game. I mean, I want to see teams compete, and there was nobody competing on that floor. And we see the NBA numbers as far as scoring is going up. When we look at the players this year, I mean, you have 3 players that are averaging 30 points, a ton of players that are averaging above 25 points. I mean, it's ridiculous. Let's look quickly. I had it on my phone earlier. There we go. Okay. So not rebounds, but points. Here we go, points. So points this year, Luka, 34.3 points, almost 35 points a game, right? And then SGA, he's got 31. Giannis has 30.8. Then Mitchell, 28.4. Curry, 28.1. Durant, 28.1. Booker, 27.7. Brunson, 27.5. Tatum, 27.1. Fox, 26.8. Young, 26.4. Edwards, 26.3. Jokic, 26. Maxey, 28, 25.8. Davis, 24.5. So you have 14 players above 25 points. 14. I don't know if the history of the NBA we've ever had so many high-scoring players in the league. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a stat machine and I don't have the best memory as far as these kind of things. So I could be wrong. But let's move forward. I mean, obviously, for me, I'm entertained watching these players come out with 73-point games, 70-point games. I thought both of those guys' performances were fantastic. The dominance, obviously, Embiid, the offensive game, along with, the athleticism he has for really a thick, big guy. I mean, he's pretty mobile. He's able to cover a lot of ground. And because of that, I think if he could stay healthy, he would be the most dominant player in the NBA. But the problem with him is injuries have been a problem his whole career, college and the NBA. And as he gets older, this is not something that's going to fade away. It's just probably something that's going to increase, unfortunately. Big men tend to have injuries, and a lot of it sidelines their careers. So any big man that's able to have a long career, you have to tip your cap to them. That's the good thing about the Joker. The way he plays you wouldn't think injuries are ever really going to be too much of an issue with him because he doesn't rely on being a run jump athlete. He relies on being the Wayne Gretzky of the NBA, seeing the floor, knowing where everybody is, having a great touch, and being at the right place at the right time and making the right passes. And you can do that forever, right? I played with Filipino players that were 50 years old when I was, 23 years old, and they were super competitive. Obviously, picked their spots because of their age, but because of their mindset, they were competitive even at that age, right? Smaller, more diminutive at that age, obviously not run jump athletes, but just so much more seasoned, experienced, and they had that old man game and they could use it and were effective with it. This is obviously how guys like Luka and the Joker potentially could have really long NBA careers because it's going to be unlikely that injuries are a major sort of issue for this kind of player, right? As opposed to a guy like Embiid, who does have great athleticism, can cover range, right? For a big guy, he's really got nimble feet, right? He's a little Olajuwon-esque, even though he's bigger than Olajuwon. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how the season starts. So far, it already started off with a bang. So I expect more to come. Is this something you like, or would we prefer to see more defense? As I say, during the regular season, I don't mind individual players' performances. It grabs people's attention, it entertains, and it gets a lot of highlights on ESPN, right? But once the playoffs come, we know things are going to change. Defenses are going to lock down. They're going to get the ball out of your hand. They're going to force other players on your team to win it, right? And that's what proves the winners from the losers. But yeah, let's move forward. Then, who will be the rookie of the year? Here, 2 7-footers, both unbelievable athletic players. And unfortunately, what I just said about Embiid could potentially be problems for both of these players. The last player that really resembled either one of these two guys was Ralph Sampson, a 2-time college player of the year for Virginia. Never was able to win the NCAA tournament, but was consistently the best or one of the best teams in the NCAA, primarily because him being 7'4" with nimble feet and very good touch, the ability to shoot and hit a three-pointer, stretch the floor, and do things that we've never seen a 7-foot player do before. Came in the NBA, obviously played with Olajuwon. You had your inside, you had your outside. Obviously, 2 7-footers. One who was an unbelievable athlete in Olajuwon. I think he led the league in steals and block shots. When has that ever happened? But ultimately, with Ralph Sampson and Mel Turpin and Sam Bowie and players like that, injuries, Yao Ming, Sabonis, what's his face, Bill Walton. Injuries have always been a big problem for the big men. And these two guys, both thin, very similar builds to Ralph Sampson, right? Similar games to Ralph Sampson. Obviously, a much more modern version. Think how long it's been since Sampson played in the NBA. It's over 20 years now, I think, right? Time goes fast. It tells you how old I am. Jesus Christ. But hopefully injuries aren't something that curtails these guys' careers. But at this point, we know that obviously this is really a 2-horse race. Either one of these guys are probably going to win. I think most people feel that Wemby is going to win. He's just had tons of press, and his stats and his ability is progressing as the season progresses. Right now, he's playing great. Obviously, Oak City has the team that's winning, so you have to sort of give them a little more plaudits because they're on a winning team. Whereas obviously Spurs, they are not a winning team. They're going to get a high draft pick next year. They may even get another French player. So we'll see. But at this point, who do you think is going to be Rookie of the Year? Who do you favor? For me, Rookie of the Year, it doesn't mean that much because some players come into the NBA more mature and more ready to to excel early on, whereas other players gradually develop and mature and end up becoming better players moving forward. So at this point, it's an award. Obviously, for the young guys getting drafted, winning this award is a big accomplishment. I think you also get big financial bonuses as well, so that doesn't hurt. But leave in the comment section below, who do you think is going to be Rookie of the Year? And does it matter? To me, I'm not too concerned. I don't really have a player that I'm super excited about, like when D Rose came drafted, and I was really hyped with D Rose and really wanted him to win Rookie of the Year. And D Rose was a phenomenal player, phenomenal. But unfortunately, even for a small man, injuries ended up subsiding his career. But let me know in the comment section below. So which of these teams will prove to be the real team in the playoffs? We've already talked about the playoffs. But the thing with these two teams, both teams that are doing exceptionally well in the tough West this year, they're both young. They're both unproven. While they're doing well in the playoffs, do people believe that they have enough to actually win the championship? Oak City and Minnesota, right? Both entertaining teams. Obviously, both have future superstars on the squads. Edwards and Alexander, potentially two of the best young players in the NBA, who obviously probably will be back in this position for a long time coming forward. So for them, this is really kind of a learning opportunity, right? That's what people would expect, that they're going to use this as an opportunity to learn, know what they need to do to be successful, and then come back next year or the year after, and that's when they're really going to be at their best. And I kind of feel that's the situation. At this point, I don't think these teams have the depth or the experience to beat Denver. So even though they're both playing well and they're both ranked currently ahead of Denver, I think, I don't think either one of them are going to be good enough to beat Denver in the playoffs. But a lot of it depends on home court advantage. A lot of it depends on injuries and just where you are when the playoffs start. So these things will obviously come into play. Out of these two teams, the team that I think potentially will be more successful in the playoffs is Oak City. I think Denver, as I said early on in this year that Edwards, I think, was going to be one of the most surprising young players in the NBA. I said that, people have been sleeping on him, and I think he's really going to make a jump this year and really prove to people that he is one of the best players. And so far, so good. So far, he's done just that, averaging 26 points. His team is doing well, and he is the main player, the catalyst to that squad. But I think the problem with them is the holes in the offense. The fact that you have a big man who shoots too many threes, shoots more than Edwards does, wants to control the ball more than the star player. The star player is willing to actually let his teammates do that, taking the ball out of his hands for long stretches of the time. You have Rudy Gobert, who doesn't really bring much offensively to your squad. And I think once you get to the playoffs, these areas are going to be targeted, right? And that's going to be their letdown. Whereas I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to consistently control the ball, control the offensive flow, and continuously make his team be successful. And when they're having lapses in productivity, he's going to step up and make a big play like he always does. I don't know who in the NBA makes more big plays than him, at least not this year. So I do think they probably have the best chance to get out of the West and probably the best chance out of these two young teams to prove themselves. But let me know what you think. And here we go. My team. Hey, I had to mention them. Will the Warriors finally fall off the map? This year, many people were critical of them signing Chris Paul. Great player, but old. How does he fit with the squad? Is he going to come off the bench and make the second unit that much better? Help these young players mature so that, he becomes Lob City with guys like Kuminga and others? Or is he going to be put into the starting lineup? thus taking a shooter out of the squad, right? And how is he going to impact them defensively at this age? He's like 38, I think. Um, Obviously, he's had injuries, which I said from day one is always going to be an issue with him. He could be the star point guard for every single team, but ultimately in the playoffs, he's always injured and the team is never at its best. And that was always a concern with him going to Golden State. Podziemski, though, has picked up and really sort of become integral to that team, where now you can just leave Paul on the bench, put Podziemski in. I mean, and now he seems to be a starter for that team. He takes a lot of the pressure off of Curry, allows Curry to use the picks to get space, to get his shot off, which obviously helps the team's offense flow. You have obviously an experienced team that knows how to win, right? With Green and obviously Curry and others. Wiggins seems to be getting back into the groove that he was at the beginning of last year, when I think he was the best player on the team. Defensively, offensively, he was carrying that team. Obviously, Curry is always a key part, but he has ups and downs. But you need that second man to help when that does happen, and that was Wiggins. But then Wiggins had personal problems last year, and really seemed to impact him even coming into the beginning of this season. But he seems to start shooting his way out of it, seems to be getting a lot better, and that's a good thing going into the playoffs. If you have Green and Wiggins, Curry, Podziemski continuously doing what he's doing, which is just making plays, being handsy on defense, and just being resilient, showing you a bit of energy, being able to hit the open three. And then obviously you got Kuminga, right? And I think them playing Kuminga instead of Looney has been a great addition as well. I think Kuminga defensively is beneficial for the squad. He's obviously the third scorer on that team, and it just makes them a far more athletic and far more dangerous team, at least in the open court. But what's going to happen when the playoffs come, right? If you take Curry out of the offense, who's going to pick it up? At this point, there's a lot of questions. Obviously, they've been doing very well in the last 7 games. But prior to that, Curry was missing game winners, was throwing the ball away a lot. The team was shooting very terrible. Obviously, Green had been suspended for a long part of the season because he's just emotional. And so even now, with them sort of rolling, I still don't know how much I believe that they can actually do in the playoffs. I do think they could pull an upset in the first round, but I think that's probably as far as they can go. And then I do expect that there's going to be quite a shakeup in the squad moving into next season. But let me know what you think overall. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section below. What do you like and what don't you like about the channel? Obviously, this is a new channel, and I'm just getting started as far as basketball content. I've been doing boxing for quite a few years now, and I've always been a basketball fan, so a lot of that was also on my other channel. But a lot of the boxing diehards weren't really interested in Liverpool or basketball, so it was kind of preaching to people that didn't care. So I felt I would open a channel specifically for you diehard ball fans. Obviously, I'm a basketball fan, so I'm going to talk about basketball, not specifically riding one team or even just the NBA. Obviously, I love college basketball, and I've been watching it for decades. I'm a Kentucky Wildcats fan, and I've been watching every game this season. I have high hopes, but like Golden State, I also think there's some inconsistencies with the squad this season, which makes me wonder if they have enough to actually do it. Very young and very inconsistent. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below what you like, what you don't like, and I'll do my best to try to deliver moving forward. Thanks for watching. Peace out. Hit that subscribe button. I would appreciate that.